Welcome to Soccer Morning on NASN. Here's your host, Jason Davis.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. Jason Davis off to just a slightly late start this morning. It's Monday. Things go wrong on Mondays. It is inevitable. Thankfully, we are on the air. Hopefully, we have no problems. If you have problems, report them to me immediately, and I'll do what I can to fix them. But we are here. It is Monday. Excited for today's show. Excited to get back on the air on Soccer Morning. Plenty of things to talk about. As always, this is an ever-revolving soccer news cycle. It never stops. It never stops. If you have any interest in soccer anywhere in the world, you can find news. So you mine for it, and you check it out. You look, okay, look. We've got Juan Mata, officially a Manchester United player. That happened this morning. Well, okay, it happened over the weekend. It happened Friday, whatever. He has a jersey now. He has a shirt. He has a shirt. He has a squad number. His squad number is 8. So go buy your Juan Mata jerseys, Manchester United fans. Now you can do that. Be excited. Barcelona gets back on top of the La Liga table with the win over Malaga yesterday. Temporarily, Real Madrid had taken the lead. I'm looking at the La Liga table right now. Barcelona, Atletico, Real Madrid, all separated by a point. Barcelona and Atletico tied on 54. Clearly, Barcelona in first place by virtue of goal differential. So exciting times in Spain. We will talk Spain at some point this week, I imagine. We'll talk about the continuing development of that title race, which right now, you know, it's not even the only exciting title race in the big leagues of Europe, because the Premier League table still remains tight. We just came off of an FA Cup weekend in England, so no movement in the Premier League table. But you've got 3 teams separated by 2 points in England: Arsenal, Manchester City, and Chelsea, 51, 50, and 49 respectively. And now Chelsea, they sell Juan Mata to Manchester United, and I don't know that we have really discussed the wisdom of that. I know it's been out there. I know people have kind of rolled through. Why do you sell to a rival in January? The interesting part of that story, as revealed by I believe it was Daniel Taylor of The Guardian, is how that whole deal came together. Maybe we can get into that a little bit later as well. The background of it, how that deal actually got worked out. Stunning stuff. We do have a guest lined up for today, Christopher Gaffney, our friend down in Brazil, the proprietor of GeoStadia, www. Make sure you put that in, because I don't think it works otherwise. www.geostadia.com. He is on top of things, on top of all things Brazilian. How do I say this the right way? Not necessarily corruption, although that's definitely one of his focuses. Certainly on top of the build-up to the World Cup and the response among the populace of Brazil. We've got a new round of protests. I mean, you know, this is going to slowly build as we get closer and closer to the summer. This is not going to go away. Police, this is from the BBC. Police arrest dozens after anti-World Cup protests. So this is going to continue. This is in Sao Paulo. So we'll talk to Christopher Gaffney. His most recent post on GeoStadia outlines why all of the stadiums will be white elephants, not just a couple in Manaus and a couple of other cities, but why all of the Brazilian stadiums built for this World Cup will be white elephants. I saw today, and I have to look into the details. I saw today some issues with debt in Brazilian clubs. So look, Brazilian football, whatever the Brazilian economy is doing, Brazilian football is going to have problems, just as Brazilian society is going through some upheaval. Lots of questions around this World Cup. And I say this on the eve of the Winter Olympics in Sochi, which is starting to ramp up, the hype for that. And while the events, I'm sure, will go off mostly without a hitch, there's some serious concern. We're not going to see a major international event, i.e. the Olympics or the World Cup, without some underlying issues for some time. You got the World Cup in 2014 in Brazil. We know what's going on there. We've documented it on this show. You've got the Olympics. We have the Winter Olympics now in Sochi this year. You have the Summer Olympics in Rio in 2 years. They're 2.5 years. You've got a World Cup in Russia going back to, these two nations. It's these two nations that we're focused on and for different reasons, but both of them are drawing attention beyond the sport that they're supposed to be highlighting. So we'll talk to Christopher Gaffney later. That'll be a fascinating discussion, I am positive. But I think the lead story today, just to bring us down a little bit, bring it back a notch, the lead story today is that Adnan Januzaj took a date to Nando's. Maybe you didn't see this. Maybe this wasn't a story that really popped up on your radar. But apparently, the golden boy of Manchester United's team, Adnan Januzaj, one of the most wanted players internationally, and we'll get to another player based in England who's wanted internationally by several countries in a second. One of the most wanted players internationally in quite some time, at least the hype around him. Will he play for Kosovo? Will he play for, his parents are Albanian? Do I have that right? Will he play for England eventually somehow? So many countries looking at Adnan Januzaj, and for good reason. The kid is impressed at Manchester United. He's been fantastic for them, and he doesn't seem to be going the way of Makeda. This seems to be the real deal. David Moyes obviously trusts him way more than he does Shinji Kagawa, which will make some Dortmund fans very upset. So Adnan Januzaj in the news for taking a date to Nando's, and this story appeared in the Sun. Okay, so it's a tabloid. Apparently, the girl ran right to the tabloids to tell her story. And the funny thing, look, he's making £30,000 a week. Why is he so cheap? He shows up in a tracksuit. He gets dropped off for the date. He doesn't even drive his own fancy car. I'm assuming. Look, I hate to judge the girl here. I hate to do that. But come on, if you're going to run to the tabloid immediately after your date, you weren't interested in Adnan Januzaj. Maybe the kid did all of this. Maybe he did the date this way to be sure that this particular girl, who he met on social media, she says, fantastic way to meet somebody when you're a famous footballer, I'm sure. But maybe he did all of this to flesh her out a little bit. See how much she wanted to get to know him rather than get into his pockets. And I'm not calling her a gold digger. I don't know. But when you run to the tabloids immediately after the date and tell your whole story, he only spent 18 pounds on me at Nando's. He didn't show up in his own ride. I had to drive him around in my Fiesta. I had to pay $5 for parking. I got all made up, and he showed up in track pants. All right. Look, I get it. There's an expectation there. Rich footballer type. Yeah, there's an expectation there. But how difficult must it be for a guy like Adnan Januzaj to date anybody? 18 years old. He's got to have a life outside of soccer. He's got to be able to go out and socialize. He wants to be able to have a life that isn't tied to training and games. So he wants to take a girl out. But hey, he's famous. His name is in all of the papers all of the time. Everybody knows who he is. Everybody knows he's got money. So instead of let me show up in my Bentley and take you to the nicest restaurant in Manchester and drop 300 pounds on you and make it clear that I'm effectively buying your time, get to know me. I'm not saying he did this. He's 18. He probably just say, you know what? It's a date. Whatever. And again, meeting her on social media, blah, blah, blah. Producer Trevor with a quip. Good sign he'll declare for England. Can't think of two things more English. Man, that's hard. That's harsh. That's cold. That's cold. Now, when I was 18, and I'm sure most of you people out there who have passed your 18th birthday, when you were 18, you didn't have Januzaj's money, but you did this. Maybe you didn't go to Nando's, and I've never been there. I hear it's fantastic. The funny part on the back end of this is Nando's capitalizing because you have to, especially in social media. So Nando's hears the story, and they say, "Here, Adnan, here's a 50-pound gift card to Nando's, and show up in some nicer clothes next time." I mean, look, and then you get footballers on Twitter and the like defending him. Jason Punchin is defending Januzaj, which is fine. Hey, I'm no problem with that. And Jason Punchin's got a point. I wonder if Jason Punchin's just trying to keep get the heat off of him after that terrible penalty a couple weeks ago? Or have we already forgotten Jason Punchin's penalty? Maybe we already forgot about that. Because, again, the news cycle moves very quickly. We're not pausing for 5 seconds to even think about any of this. We're moving. Yeah, wait. Adnan Januzaj, that story happened. Okay, now, what's next? Oh, wait, you know what's next? Maradona, bad-mouthing Pele. That's what's next. Maybe we can get to that. All right. Phone lines are open, 201. Sorry, let me try that again. Phone lines are open, 347-756-6276. So we are on Twitter, @SoccerMorning. If you're listening on YouTube, reminder, you can get us on Stitcher or TuneIn. If you're listening on podcast, you can listen to the show live, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, all of those excellent places. Again, Christopher Gaffney at 11 o'clock. We'll talk about serious things with Christopher Gaffney. We won't be talking about Adnan Januzaj or what Brazilian footballers do when they take a date out. Who knows? Lay off the kid, though. He's 18. I don't care how much money he's got in his pocket. Why does he have to go out and spend money? To keep up appearances? Come on. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, keep the phone lines open, and we'll talk about the story of Tim Leiwecke's wooing of Jermaine Defoe. An amazing story by Cathal Kelly at the Star up in Toronto. Don't go anywhere. Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on NASN with Jason Davis.
Jason Davis back, Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network. I've got not minions. They're not my minions, but there are people out there who help me out on a daily basis by giving me little messages during the show. And apparently I'm pronouncing Mr. Kelly's name incorrectly. Mr. Kelly from the Toronto Star is Cathal Kelly. That's what I'm told. It's not a name I'm familiar with. I don't like butchering names. I apologize to Mr. Kelly. I may just call him Mr. Kelly from now on, rather than butcher his name. And we actually hope to get him on the show at some point in the near future to tell a little bit about the background of collecting all of this information, which, if you missed it, is one of the more amazing MLS-related stories of all time. Of all time. I mean, this rivals the Beckham signing, which has a common denominator. Who is the common denominator between David Beckham and Jermaine Defoe / Michael Bradley? It's Tim Leiwecke. We'll get to that in a second. 219, you're on the air. Who's this?
Hello, I'm Max from Chicago.
What's up, Max?
And I want your opinion on why people, even though they're top of the Premier League table, people still think Arsenal have no chance of winning the Premier League.
Is that, well, first of all, Max, is that what people are saying? Look, I think there has been doubts. There have been questions about whether or not they have the staying power. Now, a lot of that was down to depth. I think they have obviously played very, very well. I mean, look, this is a team that lost to Aston Villa, who rounded out into a mid-table team, but this is a team who lost to Aston Villa to start the season by a significant scoreline. That doesn't mean that they're the same team now as they were then, but and they've also had that drought behind them, Max. I don't know that people are saying no chance, but when you have Man City and their firepower, and you have Chelsea bearing down, Chelsea's playing as well as they have all season, there are going to be some questions, and they have a stretch coming up that's going to be fairly difficult.
Yeah, I just think that still people don't rate their chances as much as they do Manchester City and Chelsea. I think one thing that's important is Arsenal don't drop points. Well, ever since the first game, they haven't been dropping points against the smaller teams like Manchester City and Chelsea have.
That's look, Manchester City would be leading this league by a significant margin if they hadn't dropped so many points on the road. That's pretty clear against lesser teams. Arsenal has held up their end of the bargain. We'll see how difficult it is for Arsenal to get points off of the top 3, 4, 5 teams in the league, because that may ultimately decide whether or not they take home this title. And I think they're good enough. I think they're going to need a couple breaks. I mean, clearly they have a good enough squad. It's about injuries. It's about keeping people healthy. It's about whatever rotation policy Arsene Wenger decides to go with. And do they have enough? Do they have enough goals in that team at the striker level?
Yeah, I mean, I think they need to get another striker in, but I don't know if they're going to do that.
They've got a limited window left. I mean, the window is closing rapidly. Now we've heard about Julian Draxler. That is one connection that they've that's been made out in the press. I don't know where that stands right now. I try to wait on rumors until they're done. So Juan Mata to Manchester United was a rumor to me that I didn't really care about until he was on a helicopter headed to Manchester. Now Julian Draxler into Arsenal, and let me ask you, Max, because you're clearly a fan. If Arsenal adds Julian Draxler, does that make them significantly better? He's a great player, but does that make them significantly better?
I think it does, because I think it could bring a big boost like it did with Ozil. Mm-hmm. And Arsene Wenger wants to turn him into a striker, so he's not going to be playing as a midfielder.
Wait, who are we talking about? Draxler?
Yeah,
interesting.
Arsene Wenger wants to turn him into a striker.
Well, that'd be an interesting twist of the plot if that's what ends up happening. Thanks for the call, Max. Appreciate it, man.
Thanks.
All right. You could give us a call, 347-756-6276, any point between now and 11 o'clock when Christopher Gaffney will join us. I did want to get to Tim Lewicki. We can do asides all morning. You want to give me a call, We'll talk about it. And just to add to that discussion we just had with Max, Kenzie and a Meta Gang on Twitter, Arsenal won't win because Manchester City are probably an unstoppable juggernaut at this point. I think if anybody, look, if you doubt Arsenal, and I'm not sure it's fair to doubt Arsenal based on what they've done to this point. But if you doubt Arsenal, it's not because they might not be good enough. It's because Manchester City might be better. And it's because Chelsea is, Mourinho has Chelsea back. And there's a very good chance that both of those teams can overtake Arsenal by the end of the season. I think it would be an amazing story. It would be an interesting story if Arsenal wins the title this year. I mean, look, Manchester City's experiment bore fruit. They won a Premier League title. Chelsea, we know what Chelsea's been. And now Mourinho's back. That makes for a good story too. But based on the drought, based on the trophy drought at Arsenal, to have them back on top would be interesting. And I'm sure most of you are retching if you're not Arsenal fans right now, and I apologize for that. But that's from my unbiased point of view. That's where I feel things are headed. Now, look, let's get back to this chase of Jermaine Defoe and Michael Bradley by Toronto FC. The story that was out there the last couple of days. I'm trying to find it right now. Apologies if I can't. By Cahill. I don't know. Mr. Kelly. Again, I don't want to butcher the name. And I've done it several times now. But the story is the behind the scenes of Tim Lewicki basically wooing these men, specifically Jermaine Defoe. Less work involved to get Michael Bradley in, mostly because Michael Bradley's agent, Ron Waxman, is the one who initiated the contact, who called Toronto FC without his client's knowledge and said, hey, would you be interested in my client? And this is after reports were pretty strong that TFC was going to bring in Jermaine Defoe for a total outlay of $50 million. And Tim Lewicki went back to his board at MLSE and he said, I need $50 million more to buy Michael Bradley, to get him in the mix. And they said, sure, if you can pull that off, go for it. But the Jermaine Defoe stuff, just the series of events and I'm not even sure if I can find the proper word in my head right now. But the wherewithal of Tim Lewicki, the flying to London, the mind games he played with Daniel Levy of Tottenham Hotspur, He lays the groundwork. Would you be interested in selling Jermaine Defoe? No. They talk about something else. They talk about another player. He comes back around. Would you be willing to sell Jermaine Defoe? No. He just plants the seed. And then through the process, gets in touch with, actually meets with Defoe at one point, or meets with Defoe's mom. Defoe's mom features prominently in this story. Defoe's mom comes to Toronto to check it out after Jermaine Defoe cracks a little bit and decides, hey, maybe I'd be interested in this. They take her into the Maple Leafs locker room. There's a jersey with Defoe on it in every single locker. Now that's pretty standard type stuff. But then she's supposed to Skype with her son ahead of a Toronto Raptors game she's attending. She has courtside seats for the Toronto Raptors. She's supposed to Skype with her son. They have a problem with it. She can't get her son on Skype. She misses an opportunity to bump into LeBron James in the hallway because Tim Leiweke has managed to get LeBron James involved in this scheme. Then, because she misses LeBron James in the hallway, she's sitting courtside for the Toronto Raptors when they're playing the Miami Heat. And during a break-in play, in the middle of the game, not halftime, not before the game starts and the shoot-around's happening, not afterwards when everybody's filtering out, but in the middle of the game, during a stoppage in play, LeBron James approaches Jermaine Defoe's mom. And she has a name, by the way. I don't know what it is off the top of my head. Approaches her and essentially gives her the cue that this is a town that Jermaine Defoe could enjoy. Toronto is a place that he would want to be. The level, the Ocean's 11 level plotting, caperness of all of this. That's not a word. I made it up. But the caper-like aspects of all of this are pretty stunning. And it makes you wonder. And again, this is the guy who convinced David Beckham to come to LA, who fundamentally changed MLS for the rest of its history by signing David Beckham to the LA Galaxy in 2007. He set something in motion that has yet to stop and probably won't for a very long time. But in fact, it will never stop because what it'll do is domino out and we'll end up with a league. The reason that Don Garber can say we want to be one of the best leagues in the world by 2022 is because Tim Leiweke managed to get David Beckham in LA in 2007. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with that statement. I think that's a fair statement because without Beckham, none of these other things happen. We're not at a point in MLS where one team is willing to lay down $100 million to get two players without what happened in LA in 2007. And the guy that did both. And here's a little thing in the story, which we had heard when Grant Wall told the behind-the-scenes story of Clint Dempsey arriving in Seattle and his whirlwind to sign with the Sounders. He mentioned at one point that Toronto was in the mix for Clint Dempsey, and it was decided that Clint Dempsey would be better off in Seattle, a better fit in Seattle. But the man who started that process was Tim Leiweke. That's in this story. Tim Leiweke is the guy who made the call that got the process started with Spurs to get Clint Dempsey to Seattle. Now, you can reserve judgment on whether or not it's a good idea for MLS to spend the money they did on Clint Dempsey or how they spent it. The league picking up the transfer fees, all of those things. You can reserve judgment on all of that. Or you can decide it's the wrong way to go. But you can't deny that the impact Tim Leiweke has had on this league is massive. Perhaps bigger than any one person from a star signing perspective. And we'll see if, look, we don't know if Toronto FC is going to be a good team this year. I have no idea if TFC is going to be a playoff team in 2014. They certainly have the makeup to contend. A lot of things that have to happen between now and then. A lot of people doubting Ryan Nelson. It's all out there. But Leiweke is a master of this. 972, you're on the air.
Good morning, Jason. This is Will.
Hey, what's up, Will?
Long time to talk to you.
All right, hold on, Will. Are you gonna rain on my parade, Will? Is that what you're gonna do?
No, I'm not gonna do that. Okay. No negative comments.
All
I just wanted to talk about the part about MLS and its place among the world. What's the criteria for that?
I don't know. It's a subjective.
And then also, if you think the 2022 deadline date for top league is going to be pushed back, or is it on track?
You know what?
Your opinion on that.
I'll say this, Will, and you don't have to hang up. You can respond to this. When we had in this country, when we had Project 2010, and the goal was to win a World Cup by 2010, there was a sense at the time, okay, that's really, really fast. That takes a lot. I don't know. Who knows if we can actually get there? And then when 2010, and then absolutely, it's ambitious. And then when 2010 passed and we're headed to 2014. The thought was, clearly that's a joke. What a joke that they put Project. No, that's not how this works. If you're going to lay out a plan to be the best at something, you don't say, well, I'm going to give myself 50 years to be the best. Because you don't have you have no motivation to do it. Then I have no problem with U.S. soccer. Whether or not the plan was successful, whether it was the right plan or not is a different question. But I have no problem with them putting a goal of 2010 on that. I have no problem with Don Garber talking the way he does. Now, he's got to do a lot to get there, and I'll be the first one to call him out and say, hey, you've got a CBA negotiation coming up. If you want to be one of the best leagues by 2022, you better fix your salary disparity. You better get some guys on the field who are complementary to your $7 million a year players, not guys that are barely hanging on. And for the most part, I think MLS has gotten better over the years, but there's still an issue with salaries. There's still plenty of things that need to be fixed in this league. Whether or not they can do it under single entity, I don't know. I have my doubts. How do you compete internationally on a level playing field with that? There's lots of questions, but I have no problem.
What does the overall fan lose their patience with everything? That's what I'm wondering.
I don't know.
If you get to 2022, like you said, with the 2010 premonition of winning the World Cup, but when 2022 comes around and MLS is not in the place it needs to be, when do you start pushing for more improvements? Because if you get another 10-year extension, it kind of gets tiring. You know what I mean?
No, I understand. If we get to 2022 and Don Garber, if he's still in the job, says, well, you give us to 2032, then there'll be some questions asked. But I mean, look, they'll have to be, if they make significant progress towards that end, then people won't really be too worried about where they fit in the top 5 if they happen to be in the top 10. I mean, that in itself is an ambitious, audacious goal. So we get that. They need to make progress. And I think as long as you are seeing improvements in attendance, which is going to top out at some point. I mean, you're adding teams, your total number is going to get bigger, but your percentage in terms, or your attendance numbers in terms of percentage seats sold is going to top out eventually. And I don't want to get into papering the room and whether or not MLS teams misreport. Every team in the world misreports their actual attendance. But for the most part, tickets sold, MLS has done very well and improved and improved and improved. If they continue, if they get this TV contract, which we don't know if that's done yet, but if they get a TV contract and it's approaching anywhere near the $70 million that's been reported, that's a significant amount of money to invest in the product right now. I don't know how, again, Garber has sort of conveniently left FCUM out of the discussions when it comes to how much money the league is losing. There's a fight here between ambition and cost control that they need to figure out. But I think for the most part, as long as there is progress, Don Garber's not going to be held to task for his statements at this point. And it's far enough in the future that it's not just about MLS. It's also about what happens globally in the soccer markets, whether or not leagues outside of England and Germany, which seem to be the most stable and the richest, clearly take a significant hit and move backwards. I mean, maybe that's a little cheeky on Don Garber's part, but I can imagine a future where there are only really 3 or 4 really strong leagues in Europe, and maybe the Brazilian league has had some continuing problems, and Argentina has obviously already got problems, and you can argue that from beyond the first, but beyond the top 5 or 6 teams, MLS can compete on that level in some ways, at least financially. There's reasons to believe, it's a subjective assessment, that they can say we're there. Now, I don't know that they will. Lots of future in front of us, Will.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, maybe he should stop, or anybody else should stop with the deadline requests or the points that, we're going to be the top in 2022, because it's 7 years. It's 7 years away, and that's coming around the corner.
Okay.
And in my opinion, I don't think it's going to be
but Will,
close. But like you said, some it could be a dramatic change from 7 years from now. So
absolutely, there's a lot of things that could change. Again, thanks for the call. Well, we could see the end of single entity. I don't think so, but we could. And look, if Don Garber had said the same thing by 2014, we want to be competing or we want to be signing the type of players that you get in Jermaine Defoe, Michael Bradley, Clint Dempsey, Robbie Keane. If he had said that, not 7 years ago, because maybe you could imagine it, considering that's when David Beckham arrived. But if he had said that in 2004, no one would believe it. No one would believe it. So things can change. I'm not saying that guarantees anything. I'm saying there's a lot of possibility for change. And you would not have expected any MLS team to lay down $100 million for a couple of players who were definitely in demand in other places. This is not a matter of taking a guy on his last legs with no other options. 313, you're on the air.
Hey, Jason, it's Isaac from Pittsburgh.
Hey, Isaac, what's up, man?
Hey, well, first, I read that Kelly article, and it was really fascinating, but it got me thinking.
Mm-hmm.
I remember hearing more so in 2013 than ever that, MLS had been gaining respectability as a smart league. But I got to wonder, after going through all this effort and paying, the figure I'm seeing is, a total of $100 million to bring in Jermaine Defoe, Michael Bradley, and then with Camilo at the college player article, Andre Lewis. This has been a strange offseason from a PR perspective.
Isaac, it's been the best offseason ever from my perspective. I mean, yeah, strange, but I love every minute of it. It gives us stuff to talk about. And look, I'll let you get to the rest of your point in a second, but it definitely indicates, it is an indicator of change in MLS, whether it's good or bad, yet to be determined. But there's the fact that they have a competition for Andre Lewis, or the fact that Camilo is going to challenge the unilateral option, or the fact that Toronto FC is going to spend $100 million. And don't forget, we just had Clint Dempsey in the summer. Indicates MLS is changing. This is not going to be a static league. And for me, look, I love the soccer. I'll watch the soccer all day, but it's also about the transformative nature of this league.
Oh, yeah, and this transformation has been very entertaining, whether you're a fan of MLS or not. But my question was, as regards to the people who had been starting to respect the league, they see all these strange moves. What do you think that they make of it?
Well, when they see $100 million laid down on Bradley and Defoe, they go, wait a second, MLS has cash. They're not going to just sign guys on a free that need one more paycheck. I mean, I think it's a statement of intent, and I think that for the most part, and it's club by club. I mean, Tim Leiweke did this himself. Now, he's got to get certain approval to go through all of the steps to get to the end line of introducing these players to his fans. But I think for the most part, you're seeing clubs around the world deal with MLS on a more level playing field, rather than sort of dismissing MLS or coming, because every negotiation, there is a balance of power. And I think for the most part, we would expect a big club in Europe to have more power than MLS, whatever club's involved in the process. I'm not so sure that that's the case in every situation. Sometimes it is, I'm sure. Sometimes it's not. But when Juventus comes and says they want Eric Palmer-Brown, that indicates something. I don't know what it does yet. And the story now, instead of him going at 16, he'll go when he's 18. Fine, that benefits MLS on some level, but I think there's less of an impulse to sort of dismiss MLS as a player on the international scene, if you know what I mean. And it's about money, but it's about more than money, because we know the Qatari League and the UAE League and China can throw cash at players, and occasionally they'll win the heart of a Drogba or an Anelka, but that doesn't necessarily mean they have the same consistent pull. And in a lot of ways, those leagues competing financially is going to push MLS to accentuate all of its other positives in addition to the money that they can offer. I threw a lot at you, Isaac. I'm sorry about that.
That's fine. Hey, look, I would go on, but I'm still a little upset for having to listen to the wrong World Cup song on Friday, so I'm just going to keep this call short.
Wait, you going to hold that against me?
No, I'm just kidding. Right. Thanks for taking my call.
All right, bye, Isaac. Yes, I'm never going to live that one down. Apparently I played the wrong song. YouTube lied to me. Is that allowed? YouTube, somebody on YouTube lied to me. Bastards. Just looking for views to get their numbers up. Yeah. Definitely go read the story at thestar.com on the background. Tim Lewicki wooing Jermaine Defoe. Tim Bezbatchenko gets an assist in this, obviously. He's the new GM, the newly appointed GM of TFC. They have made themselves a player for talent that is willing to come back for a lot of money. I mean, it takes a lot of money, but it also takes convincing. And to get Jermaine Defoe now, before he's done, to get Michael Bradley at 26 indicates something significant, at least on a Toronto FC level. And whether or not this is haves and haves not remains to be seen. All right, shift now to the story of Gedion Zelalem. If you are not familiar with Gedion Zelalem, I'm sure I addressed this back in September because I wrote a piece for ESPN FC that sort of lays out why Gedion Zelalem is going to attract our attention, but why we need to chill while still being proud, chill on Gedion Zelalem. I think Vince is giving me a call. Producer Vince, what's up, man?
Oh, hey, Jason. How's it going?
It's going okay. How's it going in Toronto?
Oh, it's pretty cheery, I'd say.
Cheery and cold, I imagine.
Oh, it's always cold.
Yes, well, that's true. So what's on your mind today, Vince?
Oh, I like, I love the Lewicki thing. I'll take my Toronto bias, out of the way for a sec.
Sure.
But, for the league, for a league that, at the end of the day, many people in the U.S., don't even give 2 cents to it. And just, doing these kind of things, making these moves, making MLS look big time. It's really important. It makes the league seem more credible than otherwise. A lot of fans and a lot of players too probably look at it.
It's a very good point. Perception is most of this challenge for MLS. I mean, we talk about the TV ratings being what they are. We talk about sort of the inclination of a soccer public to lean towards Europe or towards Mexico in a lot of cases. Part of the reason that MLS has yet to make up a lot of ground in those areas is because of the perception. And every time the league can take a step forward in perception, I mean, that starts with things like stadiums. You get all of your teams into proper stadiums, and sometimes you'll have football lines, fine, whatever, deal with it. But if you have your teams in their own stadiums or soccer stadiums or stadiums that accentuate what they've got going on in Seattle or wherever, that's step one. Then you can start working on the other things, player acquisition, giving your league a sheen that it didn't typically have. And every time I talk to a guy who was in this league 10, 12, 15 years ago, like Brian Dunseth or Chris Bondi, the thing that you get from talking to them is just the marveling at the steps in professionalism MLS has taken since they left the league or since they started. The idea that, now you can take care of your body because you're getting paid enough. Now, that's not a lot of money when you're making 45. I get it. But you still have enough to pay your rent and get some decent food in you. The idea that these teams have their own training facilities, that Toronto will lay down as much cash as they did for their training facility. The idea that these teams are playing in their own stadiums built for soccer. All of these things are just little bricks in the wall that help build up MLS in the eyes of everybody else.
Yeah, and speaking of stadiums, Jason, I know in your neck of the woods there was like a report that came out about like 60% of DC residents aren't like, look, they don't want to help fund a stadium plan.
Yeah.
Did you read about this?
I saw the headline. I did not read the story because guess what? I'm nonplussed. It did not surprise me whatsoever. Because I mean, look, this is DC. This is standards type of stuff, and I'm not sure that polling data will have any impact on whether or not this gets done. I think this gets done if Vincent Gray wants it to get done. They'll eventually reach a point. Now, if he can manage to push it through, let's say it that way. It might not have a lot to do with what DC residents think. Now, but there's obviously a fight here, and I've tried as much as I can because I do understand the anti-stadium, the anti big corporation subsidy argument. I understand that argument. I've tried as much as I can to be down the middle, but obviously I want DC United to get a stadium. I think DC United is crucial to MLS because of the history. I think that a DC United stadium is almost more a symbol of the advancement of the league than any other stadium across MLS, and that's not fair to those teams. But DC United is the team with all of the hardware. So I don't think it necessarily means anything, but it is troubling if you are worried about the deal, which you should be because it's DC.
Yeah, I guess, Jason. I guess I just have one more point I'll leave you with. Everyone always talks about, Don Garber and 2022, his 10-year plan. I think 2018 that World Cup will probably be a really good indication of the direction MLS and U.S. soccer is going, because a lot of the academy players will be, of age. They'll be, playing probably regularly in MLS, and then you got a number of players. Probably one of the most high-profile players, and I'll just in Ben Letterman, who will be probably 18 come that time. Who knows what happens to him? He's a promising guy at Barcelona. We don't know what's going to happen.
No,
but it'll be cool to see how far U.S. soccer comes come 2018.
Yes, that will be interesting to see. Thanks for the call, Vince. Appreciate it as always, man.
No problem, man.
Thanks for listening. Toronto-based listener Vince, producer Vince, has contributed. By the way, if you call me and you contributed to the Indiegogo campaign and you should be labeled producer, let me know. I'll make sure I give you your proper title. You are a producer if you helped us out on that level. I'm not even sure what that level was. Somebody tell me. All right. We were talking about Gedion Zelalem before Vince called. I mean, look, all of these topics are going to be swirling around. Happy to take your phone call on any of them. 347-756-6276. A little bit less than 15 minutes until we get to Christopher Gaffney down in Brazil to get his take on the current protests and the stadiums as the World Cup approaches. But Gedion Zelalem is an interesting story. Not because he is a hyped young player. That's common. We do that all the time. And I don't just mean Americans. I mean everybody. We take a youngster who's got an innate ability and we turn him into a superstar before his time. Gedion Zelalem has yet to step on the field in a league match for Arsenal. He made his Arsenal debut as an FA Cup player on Friday. Good for him. Congratulations to Gedion. He's not even 17 years old. That's coming up. Not even 17, 16 years old. The interesting thing about Gedion Zelalem is that he played the bulk of his youth soccer in the United States. Now that makes him potentially an American international. And my concern here, and again, I wrote on this in September, and that doesn't mean I was ahead of the game necessarily. He was named in a squad was the reason for writing it. I'm just saying that this is a story that's going to continue for as long as he is undeclared. It happens. Well, when I see stories, and I'm not going to call out these outlets, although I probably should. When I see stories that actually have decent factual information in the copy, but the headline reads, Arsenal's next superstar is USA eligible, I want to throw things. Number one, Gedion Zelalem is not USA eligible. He's far from USA eligible. He's eligible for a green card. Is that what he's eligible? A passport. He's eligible for a passport. And the rule is, in order to represent the USA, you've got to be a citizen. Gedion Zelalem is not a citizen. He could play for Germany. He's a citizen of Germany. Here's the rub. For all of you Americans who are getting excited about Gedion Zelalem, who may return 17 on Sunday. Thank you, Max. Who may or may not. I forgot about that. He made his debut 2 days before his birthday. For all of you American fans who may or may not be excited about Gedion Zelalem, remember this. Because he is a German citizen, gives him a EU passport. Because he has an EU passport, he doesn't need a work permit to play in England. If he decides that he wants to be a U.S. citizen, he has to renounce his German citizenship, or they'll take it away from him. Either one, same effect. If he does that, he loses his EU passport. If he loses his EU passport, he's got to get a work permit to play for Arsenal. As far as I know, and I know there's exceptions for exceptional talent when it comes to the work permit process, But if you're not an international yet, how do you get an exception? The rules say you have to play certain number of games, depending on the ranking of the team, before you can get a work permit in England. Juan Mata didn't get one. And he's been an international. Now, not recently. He hasn't played enough games, but that's why he got turned down. I think it would be a very dicey proposition for Gedion Zelalem to go through the process of becoming a U.S. citizen. And I don't even know what the requirements are there because clearly he's not living in the United States. His father, as far as I know, is not a citizen. Lots of holdups here. Hang-ups. Call them that. Lots of hang-ups for Gedion Zelalem. The one thing I'll say, we'll do this right before I take a break. The one thing I will say for any American who is interested in the story of Gedion Zelalem is that you could be proud that he learned so much of his soccer here. He considers himself American. That might not mean anything for the national team, unfortunately, but you certainly can take some pride in the fact that the American system, from when he was 8 or 9 years old until he left for Arsenal, helped make him the player that he is. Now, he's obviously full of natural ability, chock full of natural ability. But if Gedion Zelalem ends up representing Ethiopia or Germany and is playing at Arsenal and is starring at Arsenal, yeah, it'll suck that he can't play for the U.S. national team. But it should make you feel better that America helped make him what he is. I know. Not necessarily the kind of resolution you want to that story, but that's probably what's going to happen. Just can't imagine him saying, I'm going to play for the USA. Take my German passport. What happens now? All right, let me take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll take some more phone calls before Chris Gaffney at 11 o'clock. Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV. Stay there.
Welcome to Soccer Morning on NASN. Here's your host, Jason Davis.
All right, back on Soccer Morning. We're deep into this now. Only a couple of minutes ahead of Chris Gaffney. It just needed a chance to reset here a little bit. Phone lines are still open, 347-756-6276. If you have any thoughts on Zelalem, or look, the questions about where MLS is headed, what all of this means, can they reach the point of being one of the top leagues in the world, whatever that is. And look, this is the intelligent thing about what Don Garber said. First of all, the measurements for what he said are subjective. Second, he didn't put a number on it. He didn't say the top league in the world. He didn't say the top 5 league in the world. He didn't say one of the top 10 leagues in the world. He said one of the top leagues in the world. Where's the line? But in response to my point about perception, glancing header on Twitter, glancing HDR, Jason, MLS needs to improve the reality of its league, not perceptions. That's nonsense. It's nonsense. It needs to improve the reality so that the perception improves. That's the reality of the situation. Sorry. Yes, the reality of the league needs to get better in the sense that the quality on the field needs to get better, and you need to improve the TV ratings, and you need to have everybody in their own stadium, and you need to be able to compete financially, and they need to fix the salary disparity. All those things are realities. But the reason you fix them is so the perception of your league improves. I'm not suggesting MLS do a bunch of empty gestures so that the perception improves. I don't even think that's possible. There's no way for MLS to make a show of certain things and then somehow that reflect back on the league, even though they haven't improved it. The league needs to improve so that the perception improves. But the perception is what matters. The perception is what is going to drive those TV numbers up. Perception is what's going to keep your attendance high. The perception is what's going to get these teams top billing in their markets outside of Seattle and Portland and Orlando. Look, when I turn on my local news, which I don't do very much because local news is terrible. But when I turn on my local news and I watch the sports guy, how far down the list do you think DC United is? How far down that list do you think they are? Yeah, this is a football town. Redskins dominate. Then there's the Nats. Then there's the Wizards. Then there's the Capitals. Both the Wizards and the Capitals are in season. The Nats are getting ready for preseason. DC United's getting ready for their season. They're going to be preseason right now, essentially. They just made some big moves. They signed Eddie Johnson. They're bringing in new talent. They just had their draft. How far down the list do you think they are? If they get mentioned at all. That's what perception's about. 253, you're on the air.
Hey, Jason, it's Jason here. I got one for you. You know, the guy, I'm a soccer traditionalist, and I played the game all my life.
Okay.
But you had that guy on the last week who was talking about Americanizing the game. And
that was like 3 weeks ago, but I understand why you think it was last week, because it was a jarring conversation.
Well, I got little kids like you, so it's hard to keep up on the live show, right? And one of the things I think that'll drive the game, make the average player better and increase the quality of the league is money, and money comes from TV. And TV would put more money up with timeouts. And I don't think we should have timeouts, but honestly, we already have them. They're called substitutions. And all you have to do is quantify the substitution, say, okay, it takes 40 seconds.
Right.
The clock in the stadiums are just advisory anyway, right? So the ref stops that clock. 40 seconds, the guy gets off the field in 30 or he gets yellow carded, and you throw in a little commercial.
You're right. I think that you're in a practical sense, you're probably right that networks might pay a little bit more for that because there would be that time to work in the ads, and they wouldn't necessarily be about leaving the action, which used to be the way of it in American television. But I get the feeling that American television has gotten over that hump, that they've made their peace with it, that they're okay with the ad on the score bug, or the way Mexican soccer does it on Mexican TV, Spanish language TV does it is amazing with all of the sort of superimposed ads and the all of that stuff. I mean, I'm sure that they're working on those.
I agree with you. I can see that. One last comment is the Gus Johnson experiment over, because it's going to decrease my enjoyment of watching.
It's not going to be over. He's going to be calling he's going to call the 2018 World Cup, and because of that, he's going to be involved in Fox's coverage between now and then. You can guarantee that. We talked to Richard Deitch from Sports Illustrated last week, and I don't know if Gus. I think Gus came up. He's not going away. Fox has made their commitment, so I'm sorry about that, man.
Okay, boo. Well, I put my money in last week, so glad to have you guys around.
I appreciate it. Thanks a lot. All right, bye. All right, so let's take a break. I know it's quick, but let's take a break. When we come back, we'll get Christopher Gaffney from geostadia.com on the line. We'll talk Brazil, because things are happening there. The World Cup is coming. What's the situation on the ground? It's a Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on NASN with Jason Davis.
Back on Soccer Morning, just some difficulty connecting with Brazil, essentially, is where we're at. But we finally did get Christopher Gaffney from geostadia.com on the line. Chris, how are you?
Great. How are you?
I'm good. It's been a while since we spoke with you. It seems that the reasons for speaking with you tend not to be under the best circumstances. In this case, we've got a new round of protests. I'll admit that my awareness of this is fairly limited. I've seen some pictures. Beyond that, what are we seeing right now in Sao Paulo, and have those protests spread?
Well, what we're seeing, the protests from this weekend were, I believe, in 8 of the World Cup cities and another 12 other cities, so 20 protests around Brazil. And these are associated with this movement called No Vai Ter Copa, which means we're not going to have the World Cup. And so there were relatively small protests that were picking up on the momentum generated from the protests that the whole world saw during the Confederations Cup. Mm-hmm. But they were met with extreme violence on the part of the police all over the country, to the point where the police in Sao Paulo are using live ammunition against protesters now, and one of the protesters is in the hospital who's gravely injured with live ammunition. And there are pictures of protesters being chased into hotel lobbies and kicked in the face by military police.
Now, this is... Sorry, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off, but this was not necessarily the reaction of security and police when we had the protests in the summer?
Well, it was the same reaction, but you think you'd mitigate that. You train police in the meantime to try to deal with protesters in a different way. But we see that there's nothing that's been happening in that regard. And these protests that are happening now have more of what we call the black bloc element. So the anarchist groups and the young kids that are out looking for a fight with the military police are the ones that are driving this No Vai Ter Copa movement. And so it's not necessarily associated with the popular committees of the World Cup, although the popular committees, which are in all the cities, they do support this movement to some degree or other. Mm-hmm. But this is basically a signal of the smaller groups and basically 2 competing factions, the military police and the black blocs that are going at each other in the streets, and both are inclined to use violence. The troubling aspect of this is that there's been apparently no movement on the part of the government to try to use peaceful dispersion tactics first. They are just now going in with live ammunition, stun grenades, tear gas, rubber bullets, pepper spray, and being very, very aggressive in their treatment of protesters.
Well, as you mentioned, you would expect that after what happened during the Confederations Cup in the summer, that the government would take some steps to teach its forces to deal with these issues. And now we're 6 months closer to a World Cup happening, when you can only imagine that this is going to heat up even more. What has the government response been publicly beyond just sending out police?
None. Really, the biggest news in the last 6 months relative to public security is an increase in the security budget, which means, of course, more armament, more troops, more cameras, more militarization of Brazilian cities. And the federal government has declared that they are putting together a 10,000 strong force shock troop unit to deal with protests during the World Cup, and that they will distribute these shock troops to Brazilian host cities as they see fit. And so the French police have been invited to train this new Brazilian shock force using the same tactics that are used in the French suburbs to put down the unrest of the poor kids in the French suburbs. And so we know that those are not really light-handed tactics. And so what we're seeing is a doubling down on what happened during the Confederations Cup on the part of the government.
You know, so much of the discussion when Brazil was awarded this World Cup in the build-up until at least last year was, this is football's home. This is a fantastic place to celebrate a World Cup. Clearly, you know, Brazil wants to get over the heartbreak of 1950, and they'll have a chance here. now it's becoming the World Cup is happening in spite of the Brazilian people. Now, that it may not be a majority, but there's certainly a large enough minority that the rest of the world should be paying attention.
For sure. This is really one of the most complicated World Cups, I think, in terms of social, even more complicated than South Africa, because at least in South Africa, the black South Africans were behind football. It's the sport of the black South Africans. Even though there was stadiums that were not used later and a lot of extra money, and it wasn't done in a democratic way, but World Cups never are. In the case of Brazil, which is supposedly the global home of football, you have even the organizers saying that, wow, we're so happy because 63% of the population supports the World Cup. For me in Brazil, it's a phenomenally low number. What about the 40% or the 37% that don't support the World Cup in Brazil? How do you communicate with those people? And I think one of the things that we have is a real distinction between what the World Cup is for people and the culture and what the FIFA World Cup is. And that these two World Cups are not finding any place to meet anymore. And so what we saw in the Confederations Cup is that the games are extremely corporatized. It's a sanitized urban environment. It's militarized. It excludes people from their own cities and from participating in their national sport, either as participants in the stadiums, as people selling beer on the sidewalks. Any participation that's not put into the corporate stream is eliminated, and this alienates people. And I think that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a violent reaction against the alienation that the World Cup is bringing. That, of course, is not just the World Cup, but the way that Brazilian society has turned, and especially in the last 5 years, when the shine on the Brazilian economic miracle has really started to come on.
So in this particular case, in this specific response to FIFA and saying no to the World Cup, is based on those factors that you spoke about there. I mean, because in the summer, and we talked about it, it stemmed from a protest over transportation, which in itself can be connected to some of the way the World Cup has been planned and is being prepared for. But this one is more directly about the World Cup itself rather than deeper, well, I mean, they're all deeper social issues, but more fundamental issues like transportation or healthcare.
This is saying that, look, we don't care if you spend all this money. You're not going to get away this easy just having the World Cup. We're going to make it difficult for you to have the World Cup. We're going to this no vai ter culpa movement saying, look, you didn't address any of the issues that we talked about last year. Not one. There's been no material improvement in Brazilian cities because of the World Cup. Quite to the contrary, Brazilian cities are worse because of the World Cup. They're going into debt. None of the World Cup transportation projects will be ready on time. Not airports, not highways, not metros, not trains. None of it will be ready for the World Cup. So why have you done this? And this is a real public questioning saying, look, we spent 30 billion reais, $15 billion US on this 4-week party, and all the money is going out of the country. And so, no, we're not going to let you get away that easily. I think that's basically what this recent wave of protest is about. And it's a signal that people are starting to build momentum towards the World Cup in terms of public protest.
Last year, during the protests in the summer, I do remember, and this, I don't believe it was even new in the summer, I remember coming across a fairly in-depth video put together by some Brazilians who flat out said to the rest of the world, do not come for the World Cup. We don't want you to come for the World Cup. Clearly we have some things we have to deal with, and you being here is only going to give the government reason to sort of ignore those. Is there an arm to this set of protests that is in that vein as well? And is this protest itself meant to be a message to the rest of the world?
I think it's both things. I don't know that many Brazilians would say, don't come to Brazil for the World Cup, because people are going to come to the World Cup. People save up for every 4 years, they save to come to the World Cup. And I think Brazilians are receptive people. They want to have people come and explore their country and get to know foreigners. That's one of the great things about the World Cup. But that's the cultural side of it that's not being promoted. There are no interchange programs. There are very few government or FIFA-sponsored programs to put Brazilians together with foreigners. And so that element has been lost. in large part. And so people don't want to have it be a complete wash. And I'm sorry, I lost the second part of your question.
I asked if there was an arm to this for don't people saying don't come. You obviously addressed that, and then, well, I mean, it's up to the rest of the world, I suppose, to take what's happening in Brazil and whether or not these protests are an indication of whether or not they want people to come. I mean, you have to make your own decisions, I suppose, and I don't know that anybody would say there's going to be significant danger to people coming to see the World Cup in Brazil. But I suppose that part of this is a message from the Brazilian people involved in the protests. Things aren't right here. Do you really want to come?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that you have to be aware as a foreigner coming to Brazil that we're living in a state of war almost. That people expressing their democratic rights are treated as insurgents, and that the military actions are in effect counterinsurgencies. And that if a group of 500 English fans on the beach in Natal or whatever are getting out of hand, there's only one way to treat groups of people getting out of hand, and that's with violence. Mm-hmm. And so there's not the kid glove thing. Okay, guys, time to go home, time to take it easy, because the police won't speak English, the tourists won't speak Portuguese. There'll be a lot of misunderstanding, and I think that this is one of the big risks for tourists, is being caught up in some confusion, because there will be scenes reminiscent of urban occupations, of military occupations around Brazil during the World Cup, and it's going to be a little bit tricky to avoid that.
Much of the money being spent on the World Cup is obviously going into stadiums, refurbishing stadiums, building brand new stadiums. In many cases, these stadiums are in locales that will not be able to use them to their full capacity when the World Cup leaves. And so they are, by definition, white elephants. And you have a recent post at geostadia.com that addresses the notion of white elephants after this World Cup, which, again, we all realize there will be, and there were in South Africa. Your argument is that they're all white elephants in one way or another. Why is that?
Well, I was suggesting that these are all white elephant stadiums because in their majority, there are public stadiums that were taken out of the public domain with public money and then given to private companies to run for profit. And so you've changed the entire logic of what a publicly financed stadium is. And so if we think of the privatization of education systems, healthcare, transportation, sanitation, all these things are privatized, and you're able to access your human rights, basically, in your capacity to pay for them. And so the same with the stadiums. Now that the 8 of the stadiums that were public have been taken out of the public domain, given to private companies with the only orienting logic is profit, you then have to take money from the public to make that profitable. And so the classic example of the white elephant is that you receive a gift from somebody and then you're forced to pay for it for its entire life. Now it's actually worse than a white elephant, is that we built the stadiums in the first place, maintained them, paid for their destruction or reformation or transformation, privatize them, and then in order to justify their existence, the same public that did all that has to pay for them again in order to make them viable. And so for me, that's a white elephant.
I know it'll be difficult 6 months out, but I don't know that there's any reason to necessarily think that things are going to calm down, particularly in light of what you said about the government response and the nature of the police response to these protests. And with that being said, is there potential for real problems come summer? And what do you believe? I mean, again, it's difficult, but what do you believe will be the lasting legacy of this World Cup in Brazil? And will it have any impact on those people responsible for organizing it?
Well, I certainly hope it doesn't calm down. I think that the media machine for the World Cup in general will accelerate, and that will increase attention on Brazil, and that will increase Brazilians' awareness that they're in the spotlight, and they can use that spotlight and megaphone to do the things they want to do to accomplish their own ends. And so the World Cup as a vehicle for the transmission of images and ideas is not just for FIFA. It's not just for the Brazilian government. It's also for people who want to attain social change. And so things are going to accelerate, and they're going to get more agitated the closer we get to the World Cup, guaranteed. And that's everybody's hope. And I think that's going to be realized. The real problems during the World Cup, I think, will be in the way that the police handle the protests and the degree to which protests are not hijacked by right-wing or anarchist groups to engage in massive vandalism, because then that will, again, provoke a violent police response. And we also saw... Sorry, go ahead.
Well, to say marginalize the real message.
Yes, but then that marginalization also comes from the police themselves, who are known to have inserted undercover police into protest to throw Molotov cocktails at their own forces in order to justify a violent response. And so it's a fantastically complicated situation in these protests, and it's very fluid, and increasingly dangerous, and not a tourist attraction, let me say that. But I think that because of this, because of all these protests, and because of the way that the World Cup in Brazil has exposed FIFA's business model and has exposed the systemic corruption of Brazilian governance and financing of major projects, that I think FIFA's really had to look hard at where they do business, how they do business, and what this is going to mean in the long term. To the point that FIFA is going to host a conference during the World Cup to talk about the impacts of the tournament, and looking at inviting critics from all over the world to debate the role of FIFA World Cups on cities and cultures.
That's progress. Then probably about the only type of progress you can expect out of those people in Zurich at this point in time. But I suppose that's something, and something is, at least from a world football governance perspective, that's better than nothing. When it comes to the protests and the issues of the Brazilian people, clearly those need to be addressed by the Brazilian government. Christopher Gaffney, go check out his website, www.geostadia.com. Follow him on Twitter as well, Geostadia. Updates on opinions and insight into everything happening in Brazil right now, and it is clearly a fascinating time. Christopher, thank you very much for your time today. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, and enjoy the cold up there in North America.
All right, I'll do that. You enjoy Brazil. Thanks a lot. There you go. Christopher Gaffney, fantastic stuff. Amazing insight. And look, I think that as someone who is on the ground there in Brazil, someone who is in tune with the corruption, with the issues that are endemic and systemic to Brazilian society, he clearly has a belief that the World Cup should be used as a focal point for those protests. I mean, it's not just about protests. It's obviously about making a larger point about how Brazil is being governed right now. And maybe as a soccer fan, you are not particularly inclined to worry too much. I understand that. Not everybody is interested in what's happening in Brazil, other than, hey, the stadium's going to be ready. Hey, can I get there if I'm going? Hey, will I have a place to stay that's not going to cost $1 billion? Hey, if I'm at home, are the TV images going to be crystal clear? Maybe you don't think beyond that. That's fine. But realize that all of this stuff is only going to become more prevalent as time goes on. If the Brazilian people are successful in proving a point or making a point via the World Cup, and again, I mentioned it, they got the Olympics in Rio 2 years after this. They're successful in making a point through the World Cup lens, while everybody is focused on Brazil. Then if FIFA is going to address their issues, I mean, can we imagine a future where FIFA says, you know what? Enough of this awarding the World Cup, and you need to build all these stadiums and et cetera, et cetera. And Jerome Valk saying, we prefer to go to places that don't have democratic governments because it's easier to get things done. They need to fundamentally shift their viewpoint. Number one, make sure the people of the country want the World Cup. Make sure that the people involved, here's the problem. FIFA has no real interest in making sure that the people that are building the stadiums or directing the funds in Brazil are doing it in a responsible way. FIFA just says, go build those stadiums. Go build them. We're coming. Build stadiums. Fix that one up. They don't care how it gets done. Maybe they should care how it gets done. Maybe they should be taking a closer look into the possible wider implications of rampant corruption. Is a Qatari World Cup going to benefit the world? Is it going to benefit Qatar? News out today. Something like 75% of Qataris aren't going to go to games. Now, it's still 7 years away. They're not going to go to games because it's too hot. Qataris, we're not going to World Cup games. It's too hot. Okay, so let's just go have the World Cup then. And invite the world to Qatar. Sure. Because they got cash. And they're going to build a bunch of stadiums that, they'll break down afterwards and send around the world. Okay. In terms of the impact on the country and the potential damage done, Qatar that's actually a pretty okay World Cup. Clearly, that's not the case in Brazil. Who knows what's going to happen in Russia? In Russia, they're used to corruption. It may not even be about that. It'd be something else. I don't know what the criteria should be for the World Cup. Volunteer. If you have the stadiums in place, we'll come. You can host the World Cup. Stop with this billions of dollars being spent on things that will not be useful when they leave. Again, geostadia.com, Christopher Gaffney's piece on why they are all white elephants. Public stadiums being handed to private concerns after being built and or refurbished with public money. Stunning. A follow-up on the DC United Stadium poll, blah, blah, blah. This is from the City Paper here in DC. Some context applied. The question, do you support public financing for a stadium in general, is what was asked. That is not what Vincent Gray, mayor of Washington, is proposing. Clearly, context matters here. I don't know that 65% or whatever of DC residents would disapprove of the plan if they were told the specific plan for the DC United Stadium. So there you go. I'm still reading this piece, and I'll be checking it out a little bit later on. All right. Thanks to all the callers today. Thanks to Christopher Gaffney. I feel like there's unfinished business, but I don't remember what it is. Am I missing anything? I don't think I am, but am I missing anything? Okay. Follow us on Twitter, @SoccerMorning. Subscribe to the iTunes feed. Give me a rating. Give us a rating. Give the show a rating. Give us a review. Write in your review how much you love producer Trevor. And that helps us out. Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeartRadio. All of those places are places you can find this show. Monday through Friday, 10 to 11:30 a.m. Eastern. We're here. We're in for the long haul. We're going to do it big. All right. That's gonna do it. I'm done. I'm actually done. I'm going to stop talking now. And you'll be back tomorrow at 10 a.m. and we'll talk again. See you later. Bye.
The days on the boulevard are lended. We used to kick routines and the presence was fitting. It was I, the abstract, and me, the 5 foot.